Hey, so today we're gonna make some slab cups today. All right, so let's do that. All right, so here we go. All right, so we are gonna make some slab cups here. I got a piece of paper out, and we'll switch this down to here. So I got my slab here. And I always put a piece of paper down here so that we will have it won't stick. You'll see why here in a minute. And then we'll put this guy down here. This is my slab I rolled out earlier. Cover up my old slabs. Stashed away. So I'm going to smooth this guy out here. So here I'm just going to smooth out this slab just to get rid of any last like wrinkles and stuff on there. Because what are we going to build? We're going to make a cup a lot like this one here. So this is a slab built cup. It has a texture on it. It has a stamp on the bottom. You'll get to see all that here in a minute. So here we go. So, and then we are going to use this slab here. Look at that texture. That is a new texture that we're going to try out today. I tried it once and it didn't work, so we're going to try it again right now. So this slab is a little bigger than what I think I need, so we're going to pop it down here and we're going to cut off this extra clay here, at least some of it. Let's see, where's my tool? Let's just use this guy, guys. So we're just going to trim off some of this extra clay. That will get recycled. Here's another piece of extra clay. That will get recycled. All right, so I'm going to stamp this piece onto here, but first I always have to use cornstarch. So I'm going to put cornstarch on here to see to keep this stamp from sticking. So this is a little bag of cornstarch that I have put, and then this is like a cheesecloth that I put around it, and I kind of do this to the slab, and this will dry out the surface of this slab a little bit, so when I push this stamp down onto it, it won't stick as badly. So cornstarch, and then I just use a brush here and I brush this around just to make sure it's gotten everywhere on here. There we go. And then I just sweep the extra cornstarch away, which I'll clean up later, onto my table. If you have any questions, you feel free to post them in the chat. Let's see here. So got that going. And then so now we'll flip this guy over and put the center of this stamp somewhere on here like that. I got tons of extra clay on top and bottom. I'm going to trim off some of that too, because I don't need that for this. There we go. There we go. So here. So now we're going to do something a little bit strange. We'll move this camera around to my shop press here. And then what we're going to do is I put this board with the clay on it underneath my shop press. And then you see how the shop press has a spindle. And so what I'm going to do with that spindle is I make sure that this is centered, the spindle centered over the center of that. And I have this quick way of measuring to make sure. And so what the shop press will do is allow me to put a lot of pressure down on this clay stamp so that it can make a good impression. So it's centered, and then it's because the pressure of this goes so extreme, and this is just a little piece of plywood here. I put these metal plates down on there so that it allows the plates will distribute out the pressure. So I put it right there, and then I use these blocks here to put the pressure on the plate because I don't want the spindle here to be putting pressure on there all by itself. So then it goes down like this. There we go. So you see how the shop press is going downward. We'll lower that camera down so you'll see it. So it's making contact with here. So this shop press is pushing on these pieces of metal, which is putting pressure on these plates, which then is pushing onto the stamp. And then, let's see here. I get it tight with using my finger here, and then what I'll use is this rod to really crank it down. So I do 1, 2, 3. I'll just do a fourth one just in case. 4 pushes down. So that's really putting a tremendous amount of pressure here on that stamp. And then we'll release the pressure and go up. And I tighten that guy back down because we'll need to use this later. And then I disassemble all this. And so now we're back to here again. So we brought it back over. Let's get this guy pointed back down to here. All right, so now let's take a look at this. So now you can see that I have extra clay here that's squirted out. That the clay kind of squirted out more around the edges. That's what we want. Then I'll take my cutter tool here and I'll cut off some of this extra clay all the way around. Right, so I'm trimming up I'm trimming up the clay so it's even with the edge of the stamp, because this stamp is exactly the size of the slab that I want it to be. So, and the exact measurements of this stamp here is 11.2 inches wide, and it's 5 inches tall. Here we go, like that. So now I've trimmed it up all even. So there's a piece of clay now underneath. And so then I flip this guy over. I peel off this paper. If I don't have this paper here, the clay, I put so much pressure on, the clay will end up sticking to this board here. Go there, pull that off. And now we are going to peel this guy off. So one thing I've always had with, sometimes you get warping of your cups, right? If you slab build. So one thing I've learned is you just want to be very careful in how you peel and how you handle this slab. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this cylinder thing, and I'm going to roll this slab up onto this cylinder. So I'm going to just pick off the edge of this slab off onto the cylinder like that. You see that, how it's starting to peel up, and I'm going to roll it onto this cylinder right here. Right, so now it's coming off nicely, and I just wrap it around, and now I just roll my slab onto the cylinder. Bloop, 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 onto the cylinder. So there you see it. So it's now, it is on here, right? And it's overlapping a ton. You see that? And that's okay. It's overlapping a ton there. That's fine. Now I'm done with that. That goes away. Let's take a quick look at how it looks. So you see how beautiful an impression that slab made. This is using that thing here. So this is a wooden stamp that I cut on my laser cutter. So I designed this pattern last night. I cut it on my laser cutter today, and I'm using it today. All right, so now I have this slab on here. We're just gonna roll this slab back out. Right, so now it's back flat like this. And then now I'm going to flip it over. And so I just don't want to flip it over. I want to keep it flat. I want to keep the bending around of the slab to the minimum. So I'm going to take another board, and then I'm going to put this board on top like that. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to flip this guy over. So now the other side is facing downward, and I'll flip this off. So pattern side is now up. And then I'm going to cut my bevels. So here I have my bevel cutting tool right here. So you can see how I'm going to use this edge here. So this is this bevel cutter, and it's made by Dirty Girls. It is an awesome bevel cutter. It's amazing because you can tighten the wire down by screwing this nut right here. So I am going to lay it down this way with that wire that way to make the cut right here. So I got that. And then what I also found is I like to have a ruler here, and I'll put a ruler a little bit back from the edge, and that will help me make an even cut. So here I'll put it back about that far, about the same distance the slab is tall. So you see that? So I put that ruler back about the same distance the slab is tall, and that allows the wire a clean edge to run along here, and that helps me make a better, straighter cut. Let me make sure I get this right. A little bit tricky there, and then I'll use my wire tool and cut that edge. Now I don't continue all the way to the other side. I see how I stopped a little bit short here, and then what I'm going to do is pull this guy out and then continue the cut in from the opposite side, and that just makes a very beautiful bevel. If you see that there, just a really nice bevel. All right, so then I'm going to take my rib here and score this edge. Let's zoom in here a little so we can see that a little bit better, because it's a little bit finicky. Let's see if we can get this to sit. Right, so then I'm going to take my middle rib and just score this surface. So I do that now before I flip it. I only score one of these bevels. Even though I'm going to bevel both sides, I only score this side. And now I'm going to flip it back over to the other side like that, and then flip it back over, and then I'm going to score this side as well. So here, and I do the same thing, and I just want to walk this back from the edge about the same amount that I did the first one. Let's see here. There we go. And then you see here, I get the same very nice looking bevel there, right? So let's go to the side camera and you can see it. So you see that that's how the bevel looks once I am done. There. So now we are going to re-roll it now back onto the cylinder, right? And this cylinder, this little tube is way smaller than what how big the cup's going to be. So you see how I rolled it back up, and you see how carefully I'm handling this slab, right? And then you can see that the slab is overlapping here, going around. You see that? That is a really important part, because right now the cylinder is much smaller than the cup is going to end up being, right? So this is a fire cup, right? It's going to end up that big. But I have found that by doing that, prevents warping later, right? It is much smaller than it is. It prevents it from warping because it gives it a new memory of a much smaller cup, so it doesn't want to flatten out, especially at the seams. So it keeps it from warping. So what I'm trying to do is give it the clay memory of it being round. So that's what I'm doing. And now then what we'll do is we'll open this guy up. And then we are going to... I am going to take that scored part right there, and let's zoom in on that a little. Let's zoom, this camera got moved. Let's zoom that back a little. Let's get that camera back right in place. And then, so I am going to score, I'm going to add slip into the scored area here. So I have my brush, and I have my fun slip. And for slip, I've tried a number of different things. I was doing... paper clay, I was doing magic water, I was doing all sorts of things, and lately I've been using just clay and water and making slip, not even adding Darvan 7 or anything to it. It's just clay and water, and it seems to be doing great, right? Because good attaching is good attaching, in my opinion. And so that if you're good at attaching, everything usually works out. And so I've stopped using gadgets because it's just easier for me just to have slip in here all the time and water. And then whenever I have scrap clay, I just toss it in here. All right, so I just added some slip into there. I forgot to tell you, I usually do this part on a plaster bat, so I'm going to move that over to a plaster bat. There. So now I am going to attach these guys. So I very carefully work these together so you can see how that design is looking really good. It's looking really good. So now I'm going to line up these seams like that, you see? So I'm just trying to line them up really good, and then we'll look at it from the top down too. So you see how they're starting to line up really nice because I made that bevel cut just the right way. So let's see here. So if you look here, that bevel cut, the way I cut it, let's pull these apart again just to show you guys. So you see that? So those bevel cuts, right, should line up almost perfectly. See that? Let's make it so it focuses. Stick my hand in there. So you see that? So those bevel cuts should line up just perfect. So now I'm going to attach these together like that. And then you could also see one little trick that I've done when I designed these. I designed these so that if you look here at my original, this guy here, this edge here kind of lines up with the design over here, with accounting for how much clay I removed from the bevel, right? So that when I put my cylinders together, See how the pattern carries over across the seam. So you see that little bit carries over to there. And that just took a lot of trial and error and figuring out how much I'm cutting off of my bevel to get it so the design carries over. It's a little bit of just something that I wanted to do for myself. So here I'm just lining up those seams, getting them to look good. There we go, right? There we go, there we go, there we go. So I'm just using this one because this is my latest texture. I got a few other ones that I cut in the last few days. This is the one that just came out of the laser cutter. I'm gonna do that one later, probably today. And then this is one I also haven't used yet, and that just came out. I made one of these guys just earlier today. I finished it. Let's see. So that's this one. This is greenware, bone dry, because I just left it out. So that's that texture there going onto that cup with a handle. So I'm pretty excited about these new things. It's mainly just because I'm kind of done with the rush of making pots, and I had a few days, right, of idle time, and it really takes a lot of time to come up with new designs. So there, so you see how that seam is now lining up really good. So you see how that seam is looking really good there. So sorry about that. So now what I'm going to do is put this tube on the inside, and that'll allow me to add some pressure to this seam. So I'll take a sponge because I don't want to mash my design. If I start pushing on this with my finger, I'll flatten out that beautiful texture. So if I use a sponge kind of as a cushion while I press against the side here, that will help make sure that seam gets stuck together. And with that slip and doing this technique on the outside, and I'll do a pressure from the inside, these seams never split or crack unless I do something wrong. What does that mean when I do something wrong? Like sometimes I come back and I'm trying to fuss with it when it's too dry, and I will split the seam. But if I don't mess around with it too much, this seam almost always works. So you see that this clay is actually hard enough that I can press with my finger what I was just doing, but you can see how that's looking pretty good. Now, I don't want the seam necessarily to be invisible. I just don't want it to be a huge design element. So I'll never, in my pots right now, I'm not making the seam invisible. I'm just making it so the design carries over. All right, so then this tube comes out. Now let's look at the inside. I'll look at the inside seam. So you can barely see it actually, but you can see it there. So then for the inside seam, what I'll do is I'll take this tube and put it on the outside, and I push back from the outside. And I have this very important tool. It's basically a stick with a sponge on the end. I got to wet that down because it dried out. And then, so now what I do is with that stick and sponge, let me see if I can get this in the right place. I'll just run this sponge up and down against that seam from the inside. So wet sponge, you can see it's just a little chunk of sponge that I cut off. And then I took some twine and I tied it on. And then I just use that and I just go up and down the seam from the inside. Like that. Almost done. And so the idea is, right, hopefully the seam is not necessarily invisible on the inside either. It just mostly goes away. And then I just do a little bit of fiddle-faddling around with this seam up here. Right, so there. And then the only part of the inside and outside of this seam here that I haven't done yet is the other side. So I'll flip this bad boy over, and then I'll do this side, this seam here, and just make sure I got enough pressure here, which I didn't. Just make sure that this gets compressed together really good, and that's usually good enough. And then just make sure that the very bottom of this inside seam gets taken care of as well. And you can see that I have two sides. I tied a green scrubby on this side. So if I really want to do some scrubbing and clay removal-y things, like smoothing out, I could use this side. And then if I'm just really just smoothing out, I'm just doing that side. And then I'll do this part here. This is looking good. All right, so now what we're going to do is I look at the seam here. Right, you see that? And I look at this seam here. Whichever side looks worse, that's the side I will make the downward side. Because if you look at the way how this pattern is organized, it doesn't really matter if this cup sits this way or this cup sits this way, right? So let's see here. It's looking pretty good. Oh, and you can see because the way how I built it, the way I slab built it, the way the seam goes together, see it's one thickness as it comes across here. That's what I want. So I'm going to put this side up. So the one thing you notice that it's not quite round, right, anymore. And that's one thing that I don't really like. I like round, these guys to be round. It kind of comes from my history of being a pottery, a wheel thrower. So I have these little guys. This is just a piece of bisqueware, right? And it's just a piece that I've thrown and made kind of into a cone. And then what I do is I just drop it in, and then you'll see any place that has a gap. So let's see here. I don't know if you guys could see it, but right there, there's like a little bit of a gap right there. And then what I'll do is I'll push that area in. You see, I just push that area in. Any place where there's a gap, I'll push that in. And this is what I call these rounders, but I guess they're more like chucks, right? So I'm going around and pressing that in to make this slab pot round, right? It's very quick and easy, and I pull it out. And then now you'll see, let's do the top down. You'll see that it's really round. Look at that, baby. So now I have to get ready to put a bottom on. And so what I do for my bottoms is I already have some pre-cut round things that have a texture already on them. And so I have a couple different ones that are just a few millimeter size difference. And I just put them on. I'll see which one, this one, ooh, that one fits perfectly. If you look at that, that one fits really good. So that's the one I'm going to use. I can already tell this one's probably either just a hair big or a hair small. So this one's just a little bit too big, so we won't use that one. All right, so we're going to use that guy there. Make some room here. So I have a slab all ready to go. So here's my slab. And I'm just going to take this guy and just trace a circle around it here. Cool. So I'm just going to cut the slab out to the right size. There we go. And this slab will get recycled. The one thing I love about hand building is that it's so clay efficient, right? Like if you're paying attention and working really well, that you hardly waste any clay, that you can almost, you recycle everything. Where throwing, you end up with this big bucket of wet, goopy stuff that's really hard to deal with. I love doing that this way. So here, just plop that baby on there, and then we'll smooth this out. There we go, like that. And then, so here's a close-up of that texture. Let's see if it'll focus. So that's how that bottom's going to look there. Oh, I could show you how the bottom looks on one of these guys. So this is the other pot, and then that's the way the bottom is going to be on that guy. You see that? So I also got to put the powder on this, or else it just isn't going to work, right? Or else it sticks, especially since this has texture on it. That when I stamp these, it really wants to stick down onto the clay like forever, right? And so the clay ends up sticking. So once again, this is cornstarch in a cheesecloth thing. And there are lots of other things you could use, but I think that I like cornstarch because it seems to be the least, I don't know, least toxic, least thing, like, because we're already worried about clay dust and other things. So you don't want to use anything like clay. So I center that baby on there, and then we'll go back to the shop press, which is there. Sorry, it isn't really lit up, the shop press. I didn't really have a light set up for that, so it's going to be a little bit hard to see. And then this is getting a little bit crazy here. Let's see here if we can get this right. There we go. So let's see here. So let's move these up. Put these over there so you can see. So then here, this is that little thing. So it's on a board, clay. The clay is right there, and then it has the stamp on top. And then I'll center it under the spindle again. There. And right there. And then I'll use just this guy here to put it under the spindle to transfer the pressure. So the spindle doesn't end up piercing through the piece of wood. Yeah, we go. And then this one, when I do this one, I don't actually have to put a handle. I don't actually have to put the handle in usually, because usually I can put enough pressure down. Let's crank on it a little bit. There we go. Now, if there's anything I would love to get rid of is this shop press part. I'm not that excited about using it. but it makes such an awesome impression, right? The clay really ends up just really making a good impression, right? Look how good that impression is all around. It's like a perfect impression of that slab. And so when I was using a rolling pin or other things, it just wasn't working out great, right? So here we go. Let's cut this out. There. Woohoo. Yeah. All right. So now that has been cut even with the with the stamp. You see that? So I cut it all the way around. Then what I do is I'm going to put a bevel on this outside clay. So stamp side, clay side, stamp side goes down. And I use my handy dandy beveler tool again. And I'm going to use it this way, this angle right here, and cut it right there. So then I just do this. Let's get a better view of that. Right there. Way. So I use this like this, and I just cut this bevel all the way around. All righty. All right, so you can see how the edge of that stamp, right? The wire rides along the edge of that stamp to make that bevel cut all the way around. So I just had a question in the chat about how thick a clay do you roll. It all depends, but I was rolling 3/16 clay, right? I found that a 1/4 inch clay thickness was too thick. Just from looking at this slab, I think I'm much thinner. I've been rolling them thinner. That's just the way it's been. And I don't measure. I just roll it out so it looks good. So yeah. So it's probably a little bit thinner than 3/16. So now back to this guy here. I'm here. So now I'm going to score the top of this. Like this, and I'll just use my handy dandy scoring tool. So this is the side that's going to go down, right? So I score this side. And then before I add the slip, I'm going to re-round it. So come back with the rounding tool and just pop it in there and make sure it's round. Like that. So it's pretty round, right? And then I'm going to goober it up with the slip. Just goober, goober, goober. Goober, goober. Ah! Ooh, a big blob just fell in there. Whoops. So I think I better try to get that big blob out before I add the bottom. So you'll notice that there is a big blob that fell inside. So luckily I have my sponge on a stick, and hopefully I could just de-blob it with my sponge on a stick, because my hands are really just too narrow to really my hands are too big, too giant, too wide to fit in there really efficiently. So that sponge on a stick always comes in handy. It's one of the tools that I use almost every single time. It's one of the tools that if I can't find it, everything stops, right? And I have other sponges on a stick, but I like this one because the wood goes really up to there, right? And this is a very thin sponge wrapped around, so I can add some pressure and help attach things back together. I really love it. So here we go. And I really goober this up. I really want lots of gooberiness on here because it takes me a little bit of time to get this thing now. So back to this guy. Remember, I beveled it, right? And you'll see why I have that bevel in a second. So remember, hopefully this is still round, and I just pop it on there like that. And then I want to center it up. Just make sure that this is all centered up. Let's bring this back down around. Let's tilt it. Oh, yes, all right. Let's tilt it that way. Just try to make sure you guys have a better view. All right, so I just make sure it's centered up, and I kind of use my fingers here on the outside just to feel if the outside of this wood piece is in alignment with that all the way around. It feels like it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I just tap the edge of this all the way around. I hold this down and I tap this edge. If I don't hold this piece down, sometimes this piece like slides around, gets off center. So if I put a little bit of downward pressure with my one hand, and this tapping will help stick this clay, the bottom, to the cylinder. I just go around. Tap, 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 tap. And then hopefully what I'm hoping for, and it works like 90% of the time, is now that clay slab that was the bottom is attached to that cylinder more than the bottom is attached to the piece of wood. So now we just got to lift this off, and you see how that just pops off. Woohoo! Right? And now you see how it's right on there. You can see the texture of the stamp, right? That was on there, right? And so now what I'm going to do is you see there, you can see that there's a little bit of a gap here where the bevel is, right? Where the bevel was. It's having a hard time focusing, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick this part of the clay down to the outside of the cylinder. And I was doing this a number of different ways, but how I'm doing it now is I'm using my roller, which is gone. My roller. I have a brayer that I use for this step. Here it is. So I have this little brayer that I use, right? And this is a rubbery one, but a wood one would work too. It's just, this is the one that I had lying around. And now I'm just going to take this and roll this around like that. See that? How that starts folding the edge down really beautifully, right? Because I want it to look like nothing ever happened here. Right, and it's partly, I mean, there are different ways of slab build, right? So you can slab build in a way that you leave evidence of the process where you can actually see how the two slabs are joined together. For me, in my process, I'm really interested in making this seam kind of invisible, right? To make it look like nothing happened there, right? And you see how I just go around, I roll that edge down, and so it's looking pretty good, much better. And then I'll come back with a super soft rubber rib here, and I'm going to spend some time smoothing that out as well. Going this way. And that just helps smooth out, and it removes some of this excess clay that's stuck on here. And this is pretty cool because this is the first cup with this pattern I've ever made. Right, I tried one earlier today that didn't work. Right, so this will be the first successful one with this pattern. There we go. Feel free, if you guys have any questions, throw something up in the chat. Let's see here. I actually don't see the chat function here. Anyway, so there. That's looking pretty good. Let me go back through. So I'm scraping off some clay to make this outside margin a little bit more even with this side part here. Then I'll maybe come back here with this roller again. So the roller gets kind of gunked up with the wet clay. I'll just clean that off really fast with my towel, and I'll roll it again. Just to kind of, now it's more to really make sure it's rounded off really good all the way around. So that's looking good enough. So you see how that seam is looking, come on, focus on this, please. So you see how that seam is looking really beautiful now, right? It's almost gone. There's just a little bit more cleanup I'll do sometimes on that. So now we'll flip it over and let's take a good look at the inside. So if we look at the inside now, we zoom, let's really zoom this baby in. Whoa. So you can see on the inside, right, there's some gunk, especially way down there. You can see some slip that came out. There you go. You can see some slip that came out. So let's clean out that slip on the inside. Now, you can know that from what I was saying before that I don't like I can't really get my hand in there. So what I do to clean that out is this guy right here. I use this tool right here, which is a rubber tip tool. Let's switch views from this one. So it's one of these guys right here. And then I use this square end. What I also used to use is a pencil with a new eraser on the end will also work, right? And I use the end of the eraser sometimes, but this tool did a little bit better. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this corner in and run it along that inside corner. So let's show you that. So here, I don't know if it'll focus for you, but you'll see me drop it in and I run it along the inside corner like that. And then that is so you see how it picked up a bunch of that slip right there. We'll put that back in the slip bucket and we'll do it again. Right, so already it looks much better on the inside there. I'll do it one more time. Inside, inside, inside. Inside, inside, inside. There we go. So there, that took care of that. So let's see if we'll get it to see if we can get it to see. So you see how that slip is mainly gone. Let's see if we put my finger in there or something. It's just not focusing, but trust me, the slip is mostly gone. And I like having extra slip squirting into the inside. That's why I'm adding so much slip on the bottom seam, so that I have extra slip, and that makes that seam look sealed. And then I will come back and use my special sponge here and just make sure there's a ding. I'll clean up this inside ding right there really fast if there's some nail marks or dings. I then will use a super special tool here, and what I'm going to do with this one is, oop, wrong way. So I'll bring this guy out, and this is just a little bisqueware dome. You see that? So it's slightly domed upwards. I'll place that down, and I'm going to dome the bottom of this cup upwards like this. So I just push it, place it on the dome, and I just drop it on the dome a few times so that all the cups have a slight cup upward. So just so that they sit along this outside rim here. Like that. Like that. There we go. So that is domed upward. And then the last thing we do is this guy here. So I'm using my rounder again. So here you'll see that there's a big gap right here. So I'm going to push that gap inward. Let me see if we can move this light down so you guys can see it a little better. So there's a, let's see here, camera work. So you can see there's a gap there. I'm trying to see it so you guys can see it better. And then I'm just going to push this in right there. So I'm pushing that in to make this guy more round. As I push it in, it makes the guy, this cone fall into the cup a little bit more, helping it make it round. So let's pull that off. Let's just see. So much rounder now. Look at that. Ooh, baby. And you could use just a funnel for that if you want to. One thing I do notice is it looks like from all that manipulation and stuff, the seam is splitting open a little bit. So I'm going to put this guy back in and just push that seam back down a little bit, which is really unusual. Usually I do not have that problem. There we go. All right, that's it. So then this guy just gets set aside, and then probably tomorrow I'll add handles to it. All right. That was today's thing. You guys have any questions or comments? Why? Oh, so I think I just saw a thing in the chat saying, why do I dome the bottoms? I dome the bottom so that it sits flat, right? So if the bottom is perfectly flat, if the bottom puckers downward, you may end up with a pot that's resting on the middle of the bottom and it's a little bit wobbly. So if I've domed the bottom this way, right, then the cup will only come in contact with this outside edge. And even if this slab warps a little bit, up or down or sideways or whatever, then it will still sit on this outside edge. And if I'm brave, I can still glaze this inside part or do something here because it's only going to be touching this outside. I haven't been that brave lately. I've been leaving the bottoms of these guys blank. I don't know if you can see it, but I've been leaving the bottom. This one has a different texture, but I've been leaving these bottoms blank here. There you go. You see that? But sometimes I glaze them. So that's why I glaze the bottom, or at least dome the bottoms. All right, so then this one will go over to the thing. Now, this is the cool part about, I just love doing this process of hand building, is that if I had started this earlier today, this would be ready to stick handles on, right? The whole process of slab building these cups is amazing. And then before I move it over, since I've been kind of fooling around with it a bunch, I will round it again. So there we go. Oh. Yeah, so this rounder they're easy to make, and I got some. I'm going to make a video about making these guys. They're pretty simple, right? I use them every day. I have a bunch of them. So I have a few different sizes, right, that I always keep around because I'm just not super duper organized, so I'm always losing things. And then I have some for smaller. I have one for a smaller cup too. And these started off as chucks for something else, and then I started using them as rounders. So I'm going to set this guy aside. Goes with the other ones. There. I'll show you some other patterns. So this is another pattern I have right now that I probably had this pattern for about 3 or 4 days now. I'm really excited. Let's see, where's the guy for that one? Oh no, where's the... So this is the way the stamp looks for that. And then there's the pattern. Pretty exciting. I'm really excited about these. So just finally, since I kind of finished all the work I need to get done, had some free time. Here's another pattern here. Look at that one. That's a little crazy. Oh, that stamp is here. This one is one of like, it's just like a positive, negative shape thing there. All right. Whoop, I bombed. All right. Oh, and then there's one more. Here you go. This guy right here. Right there. All right. So I'm going to make one more, I think, just for kicks. Here we go. I have another slab ready. So let's just make another one. Guys have any questions, just holler. For some reason, I can't see the chat in Facebook today. All right, so we're going to make another one. So paper goes down. So these slabs I made a few days ago, so they got a little bit stiff. Let's see here. It's so fun having all these different stamps because I get to pick which ones I want to do. Let's see here. Let's make... So I'm going to make this one right here. It's so much fun getting, so I normally teach school, but we're on holiday break, right? I usually teach at a ceramics program here. So we're on holiday break, so it's really good. I get to sit down and make pottery. I get to and make new stamps. It takes a while, right, to design one of these. So it's really something that can only happen during break time. There we go. We're gonna. I should. We're gonna use the corn. So for those that have just joining, I'm using cornstarch here to kind of powder this piece of clay up so it doesn't stick to the stamp when I put it in the press. Then I use some brush to kind of move the cornstarch around to make sure it gets on everywhere. There we go. Then we will put this guy on my clay. There we go, like that. So then this will get stamped right on here. Then we're gonna move this back over to that over there. Ooh, let's turn this so we can see better. Then, so I turn the light over to the shut press. Oop, sorry, we lost the signal there. Give me a second. So we'll go over to the shot press. Right, and then this guy goes into the shot press, and then I need to check the spindle again to make sure the spindle is in the middle here. Because I don't want, one thing I found that if I don't center the slab in the middle of where the shot press is pressing, it'll come out as an uneven slab because it'll put so much more pressure on one side. And these metal plates on to distribute out the pressure more evenly so it doesn't also break the wood, and these two to transfer pressure down. So now it's in full contact. All right, so now it's been shot pressed down. Turn that back around. Let's see here. That. Then I'm using my knife to cut the excess clay off from around the stamp. Recycle. So I started off as a thrower, you know, and if you had told me 10 years ago I'd start getting into slab building like nobody's business, I would have thought you were crazy, but I just love making these guys. Flip it over, peel that off, and now I'm going to peel off the thing. So once again, I'm going to use this cylinder, right, to roll that guy up, to peel it off the thing. Because that was the one issue I had. Like, so how do you get this slab off the stamp without messing up your slab, right? Without stretching it. So I place that cylinder on there, and I'm just going to start peeling off the end of this guy here, the slab, right? I just start peeling it off the end here all the way up. So now I got like a little bit of edge here all the way around here. So I just peel off the edge, and then I use the cylinder and just roll it onto the cylinder. See that? I just roll it on the cylinder as a way to keep that impression looking really beautiful. And you can see here, it makes such a beautiful stamp, right, coming off of there. The impression that it makes using the shop press and the cornstarch and everything, it just makes such a beautiful stamp and makes a beautiful surface. Right, and so there, let's do a comparison there. You can see both of them at the same time. Looks great. So that goes away. And then, so now I got it off the stamp, and having it rolled up like that is really good because it helps keep it round. And then I unroll it, lay it flat. And then I'm going to flip it over right here. So I sandwich it between two boards so I could get it onto the other side. Right, and then I'm going to do the bevel cut. So here, and then I'm going to get my beveler, and then my ruler, and then I just walk the ruler back just like a 1/4 inch or so from the sides here. So so here you can see that I have the back a little bit, and that allows me to, this wire then will guide along the ruler right here and make a beautiful bevel cut here. Oh, let's see here. About that much. There we go. There, to make that cut. So that little bit comes off. And then I'm going to score this side. So this is the side of the bevel that I score. We'll show you guys here in a minute how it looks. All right, so I have scored and beveled. Is it going to focus? Will you switch to the other camera? So here you can see that I scored and beveled that surface there. You can see the cut. And now I am going to flip this slab over and then bevel the other side. So you see how whenever I'm flipping my slab, I just don't pick it up. I use two boards on either side to flip it, so I'm not bending that slab around in space. I think that really helps keep my cups from warping. So now I do the same bevel cut over here, except I don't do a scoring on this side. I just do a simple bevel here. There we go. So now both sides are beveled, and then I will take my same cylinder and I'll do the same, and I'll roll it up again onto here. Go, and then so you see how that's there. And I explained earlier when I was making the first one, this really, I think this really helps prevent warping, right? That a lot of slab cups I used to make used to warp, and it's because the slab has a memory of being flat, right? So what my idea here is is that I'm making it a much smaller cylinder right now, so that I hope that it has now a memory of being circular. So you see that? So it's much smaller and it's overlapped a lot. And so now I'm trying to impart a circular memory into it, so that hopefully it doesn't warp in a very strange way. It warps in a way that tries to make it more round. So here we're opening it up, right? And so now you can see where my seam is and everything. Let's put some light on this subject there, right? There we go. So then now it's time for me to blob up the seam. So I'm going to get my trusty slip and blob her up. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. There we go. Blob it up. Then I'm going to start working these seams together. Right, so you can see how this design really is looking really good, and I just want to match up these edges so that the design also matches up. So you can see here, just like how the other one, the design, right, carries over from one slab to the other. That's the way how I've designed the stamp. Right, so there, lining them up really good. Then I put this cylinder on the inside so I can push back a little bit, because it's, there we go. Get it to line up really good. And then I use my sponge, which I've lost here. There, and then I use my sponge here and press against this all the way down, just to make sure it gets stuck. This one's sticking better than the other one. I just don't think, maybe I didn't put enough slip in that first one. That's looking good. That's looking good. All right, so now I'm going to deal with the inside. So it's inside seam there. Come on, camera. There. So you can see the inside seam here. Let's zoom in a little so you can see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deal with the inside of that seam right there by taking my sponge on a stick again, right? And I put this cylinder on the outside. And I'm just going to take my sponge on a stick and just go up and down. So this is a sponge on a stick that's slightly wet, because I realized when I was making these, my fingers are just too chubby for this, right? They get in there all the way down effectively. And this sponge on a stick allows me to really rub really evenly and nicely all the way down. Good amount of pressure. Then this seam here, I can just rub out the seam a little bit here. Now, you may think that this looks a little flat, right? Right here, this seam looks flattened out, and that's okay, because if anything happens, what happens is later on, this seam tries to pucker out, because that's where the joint is. So I'm really okay with that being flat right now. But now I'm going to start rounding it, and I'm going to flip it over and deal with the other side. So always, like a lot of times, this other side just isn't right because I haven't had a chance to work on it. And so especially if it looks like it's splitting, I may add just a little bit, pack a little bit of extra slip in there, and then push these together. And then that's looking good. Let's push this back in here. So these seams almost never burst open. I almost never have a problem with these seams here. Almost always work out just fine. Super excited that these work out great. There. Then I'll still, okay, and then I'll come back in with my magic sponge stick, and then I'll just do a little bit more rubbing up and down. There we go. So that's looking pretty good. So let's look at which side we want to, let's think about which side we want to be the top. So this is another pattern where it doesn't matter which side is top or bottom. So I look at which side looks worse again, and that's the side I put down or up. Let's go with this side. Let's go with this side for the bottom. And then we'll get our rounder. Get the rounder tool here and drop it in, round that baby up. So this slab is just a little bit thicker. So it might take the next size up bottom. let's see. Ooh, let's maybe try this bottom for this one. So I have another bottom. This is a slightly different design bottom. So on that first one, I use that bottom. This has a different pattern, right? I think they'll both work. Place it on there. Yeah, this one will fit just fine, right? So that one fits just fine. And then you need a slab for that. I have another slab here ready to go. Pop it on there. And cut that out. This slab is really dry. I think it'll work though. Let's go with over here. Be nice if you could see what I was doing. There we go. Ugh, didn't cut all the way through. So this slab is a little bit hard for this, but I think we can make it work. All right, so and this guy here, this piece of paper here will go down. This will keep the slab, when I put pressure on, from sticking down to the wood. Oop, that piece of paper isn't quite big enough. We'll use this piece of paper again. There we go. Smooth that out. And then we'll add a little bit of powder onto this to make sure that it doesn't stick. Blah, 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 blah. Brush. Keep it away. That's cornstarch again. Pop that baby on, and then we will come back over here to the machine, to the shop press, right? So I'll put this whole deal here in the shop press, all right, and then we will center it up underneath the spindle. So I'm using this just to measure out where it is in relationship to the center of this spindle here. There we go. There we go, there we go. And then we'll put this baby on like that. And then we'll winch her down. There we go. Oh, then back her down. Get it to squirt out a little. And round it up. This back around, so you can see that there it is. It's on the spindle, and you can see that it squirts out a little bit. So that means from the pressure from the shop press has made the clay squirt out, and that's what I want to see. Because then I know I have a good impression, because there was enough pressure there to make that to make it squirt the clay out. So that means there was a tremendous amount of pressure there. And it's really even. That's why I use the shop press, because it provides lots of even pressure, right? And it's really, I'm not that excited about using it, but it's the best impression that I can get. So there it is. And then I use my beveler. I'm going to use this side this time, the more vertical side. We'll go around. There we go. So you see how that's beveled all the way around. Take that off, and then bring this guy back into clay. Then I'm just going to re-round it. Oop, oh, I forgot. I'm going to slip it. I'm going to score it first. Sorry. Score. And we'll make sure it's round using the rounder tool. So this is just a piece of bisqueware, right, that I've thrown into this shape. There we go. And then we're going to goober it up with some slip. Blah, 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 blah. There we go. And then we are going to attach this bottom on. So So there's a comment that they like my nifty tools. Yes, and so it's like I've been collecting ceramics tools for a while, and I always have a set way of doing things, and it's just through experimentation, right? So if I'm not getting it right, like this sponge stick came from just me every time I'd reach into a pot with it, because I used to reach into a pot with my sponge and sponge it that way, and I realized I was ruining pots, right, with my big fat hands, right, going in there, or my nails or something. So here I'm holding this down a little bit and tapping it, and the tapping is helping stick it down to the cylinder, right? The vibration is helping it settle down, and the holding it here keeps it from kind of sliding sideways back and forth. And then hopefully, right, that piece of clay here that was the bottom is now more stuck to this cylinder now. Hopefully it comes off. Sometimes it doesn't. Ooh, it's stuck on there good. I'm trying different spots to see if I can get one part to pop off. Whew. All right, so it finally started sliding off, but I kind of made it go off center. Oh, no. All right, so it's not quite there. Let me see if I can get it restuck down again. Some reason it's not peeling. There it is. So there, it just came off. So now you can see the impression that makes the bottom, right? And so then I'm going to use the roller, right, to roll this side down. And so before, maybe if I was doing this like 3 months ago, I was just using a rib like that and forcing it down that way. But I thought, well, I could use a roller for that, right? And work it down. And it just finds it's a little bit cleaner of attachment. It's less cleanup for me later. And when I'm rolling it, I'm able to tilt this and kind of tilt down to get a really nice round edge here. So you see how I keep tilting it over and tilting it over, and then I tilt it back and I tilt it back till this seam kind of goes away. And then now I'll come back here. So the seam is almost gone. I'll come back with this guy and do a final smoothing. I love the soft rubber ribs for this because I can flex it over, bend it over like that as I'm doing this. Oh, God. Whole thing almost went to outer space there. There we go, looking pretty good. Whoa, there's one place where the seam is just being a little bit of a bug. Not smoothing out quite. There we go, we got it. All right, so I want this to be a nice smooth transition, be nice and rounded and beautiful. Let's see if it needs a little bit of help. Sometimes I scrape some of this clay off here around the edge. Oop. There we go. Goes in there. Oh, I did a number on that. I made it really rough. All right, so now then I'll come back through with the roller one more time. Just make sure it's nice and round, because I love the way, there's just something about this rollered edge. I really like it a lot. I think it just looks a little bit better than the ribbed edge. More compressed or something. There we go. And then, yep, we're looking pretty good. And I'm going to do this other little trick. If this edge looks a little flared, so right now this edge seems a little bit wider than the body. So I'm going to take this cylinder and I'm going to roll it along the edge here. And that will help push this back in. It's because all this kind of pushing down that I've done on the edge has made this part a little bit wider. So I'm going to take this and very lightly roll this edge against the table to kind of make this edge more cylinder-like here. I did it. So now that edge is just looking a little bit better. Right, so let's bring this light back through. So that edge is just looking a little bit more in alignment. And I'll fix that tomorrow when I'm finishing these guys. Wow, these edges keep popping up for some reason. Oh, like that. Push it back down. All right, so now that part's done, and then we'll have to do the inside again. This is a little bit tricky for you guys to see. And we'll zoom in again. Right, so hopefully there's some slip and junk on the inside. Not much this time, but there's a little bit of slip in there. You see that? So I got to clean that edge up, and then we'll use this tool again. Right, and then I'll reach in there and I'm going to use the corner, this corner of that tool here. And this is this one of these guys here, one of these rubber tip tools. Oh, so I have a question in the chat, like what kind of table am I working on? This is a tabletop called Hardybacker board. And so it's just basically underneath this Hardybacker board, there's just basically a work table, and this is, you can buy this Hardybacker board, and clay doesn't stick to it because the Hardybacker board absorbs water, a lot like plaster, but it's a lot tougher than plaster, so it doesn't chip very easily, and it's just tougher. So even when you're dragging your needle tool across the surface, the Hardybacker board tabletop is much easier. Right now I'm working on a little plaster bat right on here, because the reason why I like working on plaster, because sometimes there's a little bit of wet clay and I don't want that clay to stick down to here, right? So leather hard clay, I work directly on my banding wheel, but with wet clay, I work on this plaster bat. And then this is a piece of Hardybacker board right here. And you can see here, the Hardybacker board ends right here, right? And the reason why that is because this is where I keep my electronics, a little bit of electronic stuff, so I never do clay work there. This is my switcher for if I want to switch video. If I want to switch, I press these buttons, and this is my mouse here for controlling the computer right there. So here we're back to a cup, right? So I did the inside. So now if you look on the inside of that cup is super smooth along the seam, right? I don't know if you guys can see it, but there you can see the inside is super smooth, and I don't have to add a coil or anything in there, and that seam never splits open. Knocking on wood there, right? So that inside seam, so I had to work on a way, because when I first started building these many years ago, I was trying to add a coil down there and smooth it out. It took forever. It was driving me nuts. And then I just realized if I bevel it, that Hardybacker board is amazing. So that was in the chat. Hardybacker board is absolutely amazing. And so what this is a full-on sheet of Hardybacker board. I think it's 5 feet by 3 feet, and it goes underneath my computer setup over there. And I basically only use these couple feet in front of my computer for when I'm teaching. And it's brilliant. It's great stuff. And I also have smaller boards that I use almost like wear boards, right? So this is a smaller piece of Hardybacker board. And so I can put wet pots, dry pots. If I want to recycle clay that's a little wet, I can put it on here. I wedge on my Hardybacker board. It absolutely works great. It is amazing stuff, Hardybacker board. All right, so back to this, right? And you can see that it's not round, right? Forgot a step. I need to dome the bottoms upward. So if you look, I want to put, so right now this bottom is flat, and I'm always worried about the flat bottom puckering downward, and then it will rock or spin. And so I have these little thrown discs that I use, and then you see how slightly domed. It's a piece of bisqueware. And so what I'll do is I'll just put the pot on there and kind of pad the pot down until it starts taking the shape of this slightly domed thing. I do it a couple times. You can see I spin it, so I make sure I get a nice symmetrical dome out of this. There we go. So you can see how it just concaves it in just a little bit right onto there. And I love having that other design on there. At first, I was trying to do matching designs, but I think it's more fun if it has a completely different design on the bottom. So that's that. I always want to recheck this seam, because sometimes doming this bottom splits the seam open a little bit. See there, right there, you see how there's a little bit of that seam came back. So I have to come back down and clean up that seam. And that only happens because of I'm doming it downward. I'm sucking that clay in, and sometimes the seam gets re-exposed. But once again, I never have issues with this seam splitting open later, but I do need to take care of it sometimes again, like right now. And then it's because this clay is these slabs are a little bit drier than normal. These are slabs I rolled out a few days ago and never got around to using. So there. So I want to polish that up, make it look beautiful, because I want it to look like nothing happened, right? Between here and that transitions around. The one thing you will notice is that when I design my stamps, that I leave a blank spot here at the bottom with no texture, and I leave a blank spot at the top with no texture, and that gives me space, right, to attach the bottom and a smooth place to make my rim, right? So I'm not ruining design. And then also when I do these bottoms, there's a smooth area about a 1/4 inch where on the bottom where the design stops, right? And that gives me a space here at the bottom to transition and smooth that thing in. So I don't have to ever touch or ruin this inside part of that stamp there. All right. So this cup is almost done. One last thing is I just need to come back and re-round it, because you can see it's not quite round. And I just pop this little gizmo in there and round it up. Really nice. Woohoo! I think that's it for today. If you guys have any questions, ask away. For some reason, I can't see the chat here in Facebook, but I can see it in YouTube. So when I log out or when I end the stream, I'll try to go back and answer some of your questions if there's questions in the chat. And then this is how it looks when this is one of my finished pots using the same technique, right? All right. Thanks a lot for joining me, everyone.